back to Pushing Buttons, a video game podcast where two great buddies discuss everything related to video games.
And
I'm
then
Kyle.
some stuff that's not related to video games, too. And we're also on the Geek Freaks Network. My name's Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi,
It's
Kyle.
been a while.
It's been a month since the last time we've recorded anything, yeah.
Yeah, we had a bit of a extensive break there just to kind of recharge the juices, the batteries, whatever else you want to call it.
Spring break, baby, woo!
Spring break month. Yeah. And we're excited to be back. It's been a pretty hairy few weeks there.
Yeah, it's getting kind of hairy, my beard. If you're watching the video version of this,
It's amazing.
it's not that amazing yet, but it is getting very full. My mustache is starting to do that thing where it curls up.
I know.
I hate
envious
it.
of that.
I hate it, but it's also awesome.
No, it looks fantastic. I really wish I could do the same, but I can't. I just can't do it.
Well, man, before we jump into the full topic, what are we talking about today? What is the topic today?
Great question. I'm glad you asked. In case the viewers didn't read the thumbnail, it's timeless video games.
Okay, cool. Some people,
And-
they're just so excited for new pushing buttons that they'll just click it and listen. Can't blame
Hey,
them. Can't blame
I
them.
don't blame them at all. I mean, two sultry, gorgeous men discussing manly topics like video games. Like, you can't go wrong there.
Manly topics like video games and mustaches. The two manliest of things that have ever existed.
Indeed, yes. Speaking of manly things, you and I had a bit of a manly venture together this past couple days.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word manly venture like ever in my life, but it was an adventure for sure.
We went hunting, Kevin.
Okay, when you put it like that, it sounds like outdoorsy. Yeah, okay, I see what
We
you're
went
getting at.
hunting.
Yeah.
We went hunting together.
We found some
But-
big game.
Very big games.
There we go.
We went video game hunting.
Like specifically retro video game hunting.
Yes, and it was it was like the start of one of those epic teenager movies, like where they go on an awesome road trip together
Yeah.
and they just uncover all sorts of peril and discovery and whimsical nature, like crazy people and not so crazy people.
I have no
Yeah.
idea what you're talking about anymore.
I don't know either. I'm just trying to make something up.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what we were hunting for and why we were hunting for it.
Yes. I'll go first.
Okay.
So for me, I was mainly on the hunt for a GameCube, and I've been wanting one again since I lost mine years and years and years ago. And specifically, I'm looking for the purple one because I want the natural one, like the OG one, because that's what I had. I had the purple one, and I love the novelty of the design of the GameCube.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's such a unique console. It really is. And, along with that, the games on there are really top notch. Like, just bar none, like some of the best I've ever seen. And while my GameCube game collection is pretty solid, I didn't really pick up a lot of GameCube games, but I was really astonished at how prices on those in particular have skyrocketed in like the past 10 years because they were really common back then.
So you know how I said that DKoldies.com was a good place to go for a lot of that stuff? Yeah, they don't have a single GameCube console in stock on that website.
I just checked that this morning before this podcast
I did
recording,
too. Yeah.
and I was like, "Holy smokes!"
Yeah, sold out.
Wait, why did you do it?
For you.
You were gonna buy me one, weren't you?
I was debating, yeah.
Oh.
I was debating it, but yeah, I looked and they didn't have a single, not any, none, zero
Yep.
at all.
Yep.
It's insane. Whereas like the
Yeah.
last place we went yesterday had like 5,
Mhm.
I think.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, we went to several places actually.
Yeah.
We went to 5 different retro game stores.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Like, I had a great time.
It was awesome. What did you end up walking out with? Or do you want to like tease people to go to our Discord to look at the pictures of what
Actually,
we got?
that's actually a great segue. Like, yeah, if you guys want to join the Geek Freaks community, I urge you to do so.
Discord link
Lots of cool guys.
down in the description.
Exactly. I was going to do it, but Kevin took the reins from me, but that's okay.
I do that. I do that sometimes. You got a couple PS2 games, a couple GameCube games, a couple 64 games. I
Yeah, actually, specifically, the N64 was also what I was hunting for
right.
because those are going away fast. Like I
Yeah.
was really, really shocked by how little like store collections were until we went together to these other places and they were like fully fleshed out. Well, a couple of them were.
There was the last place that we went to was just like
Oh
they
my
pride
God.
themselves on having every game. It
That
was
last location
insane.
was incredible. We'll go into more detail in a bit, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I was hunting for my childhood essentially. Yeah, if you're looking at the video version, you can see some Sega Genesis stuff behind me. That's what I was hunting for, is a bunch of Sega Genesis games. If you want to see exactly what I got, like I said before, check out the Discord. There's a nice picture of it all sprawled out. You can see that. I'll give away the one that's visible in the video. That's Sonic the Hedgehog right there, complete in box, the NFR version. But yeah, man, that was such a good time, dude. Like, so I checked off nearly every single one of my like have to haves. Like I've got my list of Genesis games that I need, and then the list of Genesis games that I want. There's
Mhm.
only one more Genesis game that is on my need list that I do not have, and
I
it's
think I
getting
know
there.
what it is. Can
Yeah,
I tell you?
yeah,
Sonic 3,
yeah,
complete in box.
yeah.
Okay,
But
very good.
it's really hard to find it complete in box with a good condition cartridge.
Mhm.
That's what I'm struggling with. And I really want it to be complete in box for that one.
So, you know how you looked for a GameCube? For me this morning, I actually looked for a copy of Sonic 3 complete in box.
I did too.
And DK Oldies does have one.
I know, but it's like $90 or something like that.
It's crazy expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's why I didn't buy it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was considering it because I think they said it's a good condition, but I haven't bought it yet. I probably have to wait a couple of weeks for my wife to be able to be okay
I was
with
going
me
to say,
buying
let her surprise you with it.
it. She does know that that's the one that I want.
There you go.
But
That's the way.
man, talking about all these retro games though, it got us thinking. Like before we left, we discussed what the topic of this episode was going to be, and we want to talk about like the most timeless games of all time. Like of all time, that's a little redundant. The games that really stand the test of time. And we had, I think, our most recent episode was memorable games. There's probably going to be a little bit of crossover.
Most replayable games.
Most replayable games, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, there's going to be probably some crossover, but this one will hit a little different. There's a little bit of a criteria difference in that it's less subjective and more objective. Like better gameplay that's just it's lasted throughout the years and will continue to last no matter how long or how far into the future we get.
No, I'm glad you brought up gameplay. I feel like there's many different ways you can approach this topic. Like you can go with graphics, you can go with gameplay, you can go with lasting overall value, or basically even like the novelty of it at the
Yeah.
time. Like that staying power. I think that's what I'm trying to express. But yeah, I'm ready to get into this. I'm super excited.
Well, I'm going to kick it off with probably the easiest one that probably anybody that's played a video game knows of, Super Mario. And in my opinion, there are 4 Mario games that will forever be the best 4 Mario games. And that is,
Hmm.
do you want to guess what they are?
Super Mario Brothers.
Yes.
I want to say Super Mario Brothers 3,
Yes.
Super Mario World,
Yes.
Super Mario 64.
Yes, that is the 4 that I put down on my list. So
Yes.
the fact that we agreed on that without talking about it, and we have pretty varying degrees of love for those franchises, like Mario. Yeah, that just shows that they are very timeless games.
So before you jump into that, I already know that Super Mario 64 is a timeless game. I have never played it before.
Right.
So I'm really curious to see, like, is it truly a timeless game? Will I still enjoy it,
I th- I
even though I'm so far away from it, like in years?
I think you will because you've never played it. I bought it not okay. So I did buy your copy on the 64 for you, but I
That was
bought
what I skipped. Thank you.
I bought it for myself as part of the Mario 3D All Stars collection on the Switch,
Hmm.
and I tried playing it, and it does hold up, but so much of my nostalgia goggles is what was making it seem so much better than it was. So the game, like the controls are a bit out of date. There are some things with Mario 64 that are out of date. The graphics for a 3D Mario game are definitely outdated.
I
But
imagine so.
the
Yes.
the core gameplay and the gameplay loop and just the addiction to collecting things that you get in a collectathon like Mario. And if you played any, this is Super Mario 64 is the like the premier 3D platformer from the 64 PS1 era. It is the one that launched that basically that whole subgenre of platforming games was this one. So Mario 64, in my opinion, stands the test of time and forever will stand the test of time.
Yeah, and of course, Mario 1, 3, and World, like I think I consider those timeless in all aspects. Like with graphics, like that is never gonna lose its appeal.
So,
Gameplay, perfection. Like there's nothing else to improve upon that.
right,
Like there's absolutely nothing more that could have been done with that game or any of those games. And
Mario
of course,
is I'm
the
sorry,
lasting value.
Mario is the de facto leader in platforming. Like there's just no other platformer that will ever have the staying power that a Super Mario game will have. What you talked about graphics for Mario 1, 3, and World. Which style of those? Which one of those games has the better graphic style that you are more attracted to?
Oh, World by
Oh,
far.
really?
Like
Okay.
World is, I think, the epitome of everything the Super NES can do,
Okay.
and it's such a well put together package. Like the art style and the art direction and the music are just yeah. I could talk about it all day.
The my favorite thing about Super Mario World, and they didn't really carry this over into Super Mario Maker or Maker 2 rather, but when you beat a Super Mario World level and that does that the
Yep, yep.
and then at the end of it goes and then yeah, that sound effect, just that is yeah. I'm sure that Frank will probably take out me doing that one of the three times and put in the
Oh
real
no.
sound effect. But yeah,
Actually, Frank, there you go.
the music and the sounds in that game were great. I actually prefer the graphic style of Super Mario 3
Oh,
myself
okay.
because it's a
Okay.
little more
Sure.
refined from the first one, but it's not as I don't know as I don't want to say high definition. I guess as high res as a Super Nintendo game because it was still originally released on the NES.
Mhm.
So, in my opinion, Mario 3 is the better of them, but they're totally different styles of games too, which is why I can list them separately on this list and be comfortable with it.
It says a lot too about Mario games since 64 as well, because with Sunshine, you had the gimmicky water pack thing,
Yeah.
and that doesn't really hold up as well. And then Galaxy has the Wiimote motion controls, and that didn't really, that didn't matter to me at all.
Yeah.
And then Odyssey took it to an extreme with the motion controls, like to where I didn't even want to replay the game after I first played it.
Yeah.
Like it's so annoying to do that over and over.
A lot of games like that, I try to go back and get as close to 100%ing as I can without getting tired of the game. Odyssey, I did not do that because I can't handle motion controls. And they kind of limit the motion controls if you're using a Switch Pro controller, which I did play with, but there's still
Okay.
some of it in there, and it's just
Hmm.
I hate motion controls in games. It's so gimmicky. I say that all the time, but it's just a hassle.
It really is. Like even with the latest Zelda game, Breath of the Wild, which is also on my list for timeless games, like the motion controls, I don't care for them.
Well,
You
shit.
know.
Let's talk about Zelda then,
Well, obviously,
because I've
I
got
made a list of
okay.
four,
Okay, I've got
three,
three. I've got three.
three. All right,
Yeah.
you name the three.
Okay, I'll name your four then. If Breath of the Wild's on yours, that's the one that's not on mine.
Right.
So Zelda 1, The Legend of Zelda.
Oh, okay. You went with that one.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
sure.
very,
Go
very
ahead.
first one.
Okay.
Link to the Past
Hmm.
and Ocarina of Time.
Yep.
Those are my three.
And I would put Majora's Mask on there
I know
as
you would.
well.
But
Yes.
there's as divisive as it is, I don't think that there's enough of a difference to list both Ocarina and Majora
I know. I know. It was a
separately.
hard decision to include both.
So yeah, I don't care for Majora's Mask because I don't like time limits and time constraints, but it is more of that Ocarina of style or of Time style Zelda, which I loved. So I'm not going to knock
Well,
it too hard.
because it dealt with time as a gameplay mechanic, and I haven't really seen that replicated as well since then. That's why I included it.
You didn't like 24, the game?
I mean, I did like it at the time,
Yeah,
but that definitely shows its age now, I imagine.
yeah. Oh man, finding that yesterday at some of those stores, that was funny.
But also, what made Majora's Mask timeless to me, along with the time mechanic system, was just the overall atmosphere of the game. Like, it was so well done. Like, honestly, it could have been a survival horror game.
It
Like,
was
that's how dark, very dark game.
it was definitely a more dark and macabre style like
Yeah.
approach to a Zelda game that we haven't really seen before or since because Zelda's usually a very bright game.
I just really appreciate it for that. I feel like it took a lot of risks, even though it used a lot of the same template as Ocarina. It did so much more differently, and I really give it a lot of credit for that.
Well, what's your favorite of the franchise? I'm just gonna ask you flat out.
Well, you mentioned Link to the Past,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's the penultimate top-down version of Zelda.
Okay.
Link Between Worlds was super freaking close. That was on the 3DS. It was a great game, but Link to the Past just nails it. Like overall, it's the overall package. Timeless graphics, gameplay, presentation, like it's all there.
So you had Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Majora's
And
Mask, and Breath of the Wild.
yeah,
Those,
Ocarina of Time, of course, is a given.
yeah,
Like to me, that's always replayable.
yeah.
I'll always have the same feelings playing it, even though I've gotten older. Like I know I can always replay that and enjoy the hell out of it. Like it's just the most replayable game to me, which I also mentioned in the previous episode.
Right, yeah. And like Super Mario Brothers, the first Legend of Zelda was like the template for every game in its genre to come afterward. Like
Mhm.
even in my roguelike genre, The Binding of Isaac, one of the biggest roguelikes of all time, one of my favorite games of all time, is heavily inspired by the original Legend of Zelda game. Just in its top-down view, when you're going through dungeons and the way that the layout of the dungeons are inspired heavily from the original Legend of Zelda. But like you said with the Link to the Past, that game is like the explorate top-down exploration game that so many games since have tried to replicate but can't seem to quite get the same feeling from, you know?
Totally, totally. Like you know, a game that came out recently, Tunic, that is really damn close. Like I really love playing that game, and I really need to revisit it soon. But I'm like extremely far in Elden Ring right now. I need to finish that first. But yeah, Link to the Past, just overall incredible game. And I would have the original Zelda on my list, but I've never played it. So that's another one.
Okay, I gotcha. We might have to change that at some point.
And then for Breath of the Wild, I feel like what it did for the open world genre is what sets that as a timeless game. Because I feel like it took all of the best parts of open world design and just blended it all together like flawlessly. Like it's really such a great game. The only weakness it has is the dungeons. I feel like, and Majora's Mask too, for that matter. The dungeons weren't the greatest in both of those games, but just what it did by risk taking and putting itself out there as a whole different type of game. Like that's what I appreciate most about them.
I don't think Breath of the Wild was necessarily taking risks that they didn't know were gonna pay off. Like, if you say the next Zelda game is open world before
Mhm.
Breath of the Wild came out, any Zelda fan, like the mainstream Zelda fans, are going to clamor for that game.
Oh,
It,
totally. Yeah.
so I don't really give them the same credit for taking risks with that one because that was more of just like what do you do with the best one of the best selling franchises of all time? You put it in one of the best selling genres of all time, and you've got a cash printer essentially at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I would have put the other ones on there like Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, but they each have flaws.
Yeah.
Like for me, Wind Waker, it was just too much of a fetch quest. And I've only played the original GameCube one, so I haven't played the HD remake. And same with Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess, I just felt like didn't quite hit the same notes as Ocarina. it was trying to go for the same feeling, but I felt like it was just lacking in all departments. And then Skyward Sword was, my opinion, the worst one. That had like too much hand holding and constant repetitiveness with boss fights as well as item collecting, and it just felt like it was bloated. Not to mention the motion controls that you love so much.
The motion controls that I love so much. Nice. Oh man, I can't help but point out the fact that whenever we talk about Zelda, nobody brings up Zelda 2, at least in our circle. It is a very it's an iconic game in its own right. Like
Mm.
it's just so vastly different from the rest of the Zelda franchise. And honestly, I don't like that game whatsoever, but it did inspire games like Shovel Knight to some extent. And
Okay.
I actually have Shovel Knight on this list
Oh,
because
okay. Nice.
it's not an old game. I mean, it's like it's old-ish by today's standards, but it's not retro like we're talking about. But I think it's timeless in the same sense that it took what made some of those amazing games great and didn't super iterate on them,
Hmm.
but just modernized it to where it's playable on more systems. It's got prettier graphics because you can have more colors, and the controls are a little more tight than what you could get on, you know, the SNES or the Genesis back in the day. That's why I have Shovel Knight on this list, because if you ever want that retro feel, Shovel Knight still has that, but it also has the modern day conveniences of like modern indie games. So I think
Okay.
Shovel Knight
Okay.
will sincerely last the yeah, I'm gonna say last the test of time. I don't know what I was going with there. It'll hold up though in years to come, decades to come for sure.
Yeah, I would argue, just to stay in the same field, like any of the following indie games, like Celeste, Hollow Knight, let's see, maybe, I think that's it. Just those two, really.
I would
Those
put
are going to be
Darkest Dungeon on that list personally.
really
I
Darkest
would.
Dungeon.
Out of all the roguelike style games, I think Darkest Dungeon would be the one,
I thought
because
you'd pick Binding of Isaac.
you would think, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Binding of Isaac is like it's I keep saying de facto leader. It's the one that like spawned the the new wave of roguelike games that we've seen since 2013, I think. But
Mm.
Darkest Dungeon was its own thing. It was a dungeon crawler with turn-based combat, and it did the turn-based combat in such a way to make it different. But if you're familiar with JRPGs, you get what's going on, but it's presented so vastly different, and it's just really its own thing. So no matter where the roguelike genre, the dungeon crawler genre, or even JRPGs go in the future, Darkest Dungeon will still be different enough while still being familiar enough that it'll be forever playable. And it's got a lot of random generation stuff to it too, so it's already going to be replayable, which
Mm.
is now making me think that I should have talked about it on the last episode, but I didn't. I talked about Binding of Isaac instead. Yeah, I didn't have Darkest Dungeon on this list at all, but I'm definitely gonna add it to it now.
Man, I have tried so hard to like that game. I just don't know what it is. Like I think it's just the overall like randomness of it that's really difficult for me to wrap my head around. But I really need to try it again. Like I really need to just devote myself to this game for like a week
It's
and
a
just it's a slow burn game, I think.
it's a super dark game, which seems up your alley. It's got tactical combat to some extent, which also seems up your alley. I don't know how much randomness is in there besides like quest rewards and the layout of the dungeons there are.
Mm.
There is a lot of chance to hit bullshit. Like in, you want to talk chance to hit, you're talking Morrowind. That's why that game doesn't stand the test of time, and it's not on my list, because that chance to hit thing was so bad. There's a bit of that
Ah,
in Darkest Dungeon that I could see would make it a little tough to get into.
I think now's a good time to mention Skyrim and GTA 5 will be timeless forever because of how many times it gets re-released.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a forced timeless thing, but it's
Get
yeah,
that out of the way.
timeless nonetheless. Yeah, they're not on my list, but I debated putting both of them on my list in the same line like you just did, back to back for sure.
GTA and Elder Scrolls, I think, they're so highly regarded, but I don't see them as timeless games. I feel like they're very much a product of their time period, especially the GTA games. Like I don't think they're truly timeless. I feel like they're very much like contained within that time period of when they were released.
Yeah. And then
And
re-released, and then re-released, and
over
then
and over.
re-released. Yeah.
That's what actually made me think that way was, as amazing as Skyrim is, and I'm sure it is, I've never really given it a real chance. I put like maybe 40 hours into it, and I was like, okay, I'm fine with
That's
not playing
more
more.
than a real chance. Let's be honest. 40 hours
Well,
is more than
I
enough to
mean,
know if you're going to like it.
considering how big the game is, like I felt like the gameplay was not very, it didn't make me feel enthusiastic about wanting to play more of the game.
Gotcha.
And I enjoy Fallout way more, but I don't even consider Fallout a timeless game. But the Bethesda ones.
Well,
But yeah, go ahead.
um, you brought up Fallout. I'm going to bring up Knights of the Old Republic. It's kind of not in the same vein,
Okay.
but it's a Western RPG. That's where my brain went. I actually have Knights of the Old Republic on my list, and I'm gonna include all the old school, what I'm gonna consider old school BioWare games on here. Neverwinter Nights, to some extent. All the games like Icewind Dale and the Forgotten Realms games that aren't all even made by BioWare, but that style of game that led up to Knights of the Old Republic. But if you ask me, the most timeless Star Wars game and probably the most timeless Western RPG is going to be Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. That was just such a it's like hard to think of the words about that game.
I think its biggest strength is its story. Like
Yeah.
the gameplay isn't really that, it's not anything bad, but it doesn't really leave a lasting impression, I think. Like, it's just a tool for you to progress through the story.
So I actually liked the combat system in that game.
It's great. It's great. Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like though what really motivated me was the writing and
Yeah.
the story and the dialogue, the spoken dialogue. Like, holy crap, that was just so trend-setting at the time for, like a Western RPG.
Yeah. The fact that it was on the original Xbox and was I just think it was ahead of its time. Like
Yep.
if it came out instead of Mass Effect in 2007 or 2007, was that when that came out? Yeah.
Yes.
If KOTOR would have come out when Mass Effect came out, KOTOR would have been a completely different game. They were kind of
Oh yeah.
constrained
Oh yeah.
to do the turn-based combat the way they did, uh, due to limitations of the hardware and the physical medium being a CD at the time. It was just you couldn't fit as much on there, and the fact that they went way overboard with all the side quests and the spoken dialogue, even if a lot of the alien dialogues repeated throughout the game. Omidopi, just like over and over again. That might have been from the Old Republic, that Omidopi, but
Bun bun shia bun.
yeah, there you
Bun
go.
bun pizza. House. I always remember that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, they obviously there was a lot of limitations at the time, so they had to repeat a lot of that alien dialogue and stuff. But it was so far ahead of its time. I'm I think that's why I'm not looking forward to the remake or remaster, whatever's been announced recently. I'm not looking forward to that as much because the old game still holds up to this day. So I don't want them to try to replace that.
I mean, for me, I think how you view Western RPGs, I view immersive sims. I feel like every game that is an immersive sim is truly a timeless game. I'm thinking like System Shock, Deus Ex, BioShock, Dishonored, Prey, like the new one, the 2017 one.
Right.
Thief as well. And there's probably a couple more I'm forgetting right now. But those games, I think, really stand the test of time because they're so well done with the gameplay. Like you can truly choose how you want to play in those games. Like if you have a problem in front of you, you can come up with so many different solutions to solve that problem. And that's what the different gameplay styles, it leads to player exploration and discovery. And just from a gameplay standpoint, I truly see those as timeless classics.
Well, from the ones that you listed, which one do you think you would pick over all the rest as being the most timeless, the one that would hold up the best?
Man, that's a good question. If I had to pick one, wow. I would say either Deus Ex or BioShock.
Okay.
And the reason why Dishonored's not on there, I would have picked that, but the story, it's okay, but it's not the greatest. And System Shock 2, it's an amazing game, but it's dated. Like you can when you play it's dated. And Deus Ex is too, but the way you progress through that game and interact with the world and discover how many solutions you can come up with on your own, like it truly was like the pinnacle and really like the first of its kind.
I
Deus Ex was just incredible game.
I would have selected Deus Ex from that list as well because the only thing that doesn't hold up are the graphics, and
Yeah. Yep.
obviously the graphics are a product of the time period, so you can't really hold that against it as far as timelessness goes, in my opinion. So yeah, that
And
definitely be mine.
yes, that's why I wanted to pick Dishonored because that game still
It's
looks great
beautiful.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, the art direction of that game is flawless. Like I love playing that game just to get immersed in that world. Like it's incredibly well made.
Is you want to talk about games that you can do whatever you want? I have Minecraft on my list. I
Okay,
I
okay,
I
nice.
genuinely think that Minecraft is it's got to be one of the most timeless games of all time just because
Mhm.
of how many people still play it to this day. And it's like almost like a decade old at this point, isn't it? Or maybe more?
2011, I think it came out.
Oh damn, so it's over a decade old at this point.
Yep,
And
yep.
they're still coming out with new shit for it. There's still tons of people playing it. There's different ways of playing it. It's all about creativity, and its only limit is essentially your creativity as a player or as a creator for like a content creator for it or whatever you're doing. But that game, it's essentially limitless within the world, within the confines of the game,
Mhm.
because it's just pure creativity.
I think that is a really strong facet of what composes or comprises a timeless game. I think infinitely more important than graphics or story is gameplay. And when I think of gameplay, I actually think of Chrono Trigger.
Okay.
And the reason why hang on to that one so dearly, I think that is truly a timeless game. Like overall, just immensely well done.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
And for me, I played it on an emulator, but then later on, I picked it up again and replayed it on the Nintendo DS,
Okay.
and it felt just as good to play the first time as it did or the second time as it did the first time. And its story is really well done too. Like it can, again, like it covers time traveling, like Majora's Mask, and I feel like the characters are really well written, even though they're just little sprites on your screen. Like the story was really well done, and all the character interactions in your party, as well as how they played off of each other with the gameplay, because you can combine their abilities to make new attacks, and it was just really well put together.
So whenever I think of, I didn't own a Super Nintendo as a kid. Um, Whenever I think of Super Nintendo, I think the third game I always think about is Chrono Trigger.
Mm.
When I think about the best JRPGs of all time, the first game I come up with is Chrono Trigger. And I've never completed that game. I also have it, or had it, I don't know
Oh,
if I still do, on the DS. I might still
good.
have my DS copy of it. I have to go searching. After retro game hunting yesterday, I have to go through that closet and see what I have because I know I have a Nintendo 64 somewhere. I'm sure of it with my copy of Majora's Mask. I know I've got my DS. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting way off topic now.
It's like that momentum builds up, and you just can't contain it anymore.
Oh man. There was one time when this is okay, this is off topic now, but when you and I were like DVD collecting back in the day,
Mhm.
like after high
Sure.
school,
Yep.
um, I got to a point where I was making a list of every single DVD I owned. I think at the time it was on IGN's website. You could search a game or a movie on their website and then say add it to library just as a
Oh,
tracker.
I remember that.
Yeah, I did that with
I
all
do.
all of my
Yeah, yeah.
games. All of the games that I've rented on GameFly, I clicked played, and then every game that I owned, I add to library, and then with all my movies, I did the exact same thing. Be crazy if I could find the login to that to see what I lost over the years. Because
Oh, I know.
I've gone through like just the Xbox 360 alone. I have gone through. Speaking of timeless, the Xbox 360 is probably the most timeless console of all time. If the Xbox Live Arcade was still around, but
True. Yeah.
I probably had traded in, I don't know, damn near 150 Xbox 360 physical games to a
Mhm.
GameStop just over the years because it was my most played console ever. 'Cause-
Oh yeah, easily,
Yeah,
easily most played.
because it
Yeah,
came out at
same for me.
yeah, it came out at the
Yep.
time like during high school, or like it was for me it was the biggest after high school, and I moved out and lived in an apartment, and it was like my only form of entertainment because I couldn't afford cable. I could barely afford internet. I had my 360 and I had all the cheap games I could get. And yeah, damn, I wonder how many thousands of dollars those games would be worth now if I hadn't traded them in years ago.
I know. Like, there's definitely we could probably do a whole episode based off of what we traded in. I think we should do that one. That sounds like fun. Another topic for another time.
That is another topic for another time, as well as going through our current collections and
Yes,
talking about our like prides and joys of our current collection.
that's down the road. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. We'll do that one.
I'm gonna totally do a 180 on this and talk about some more retro shit. Doom 2. I don't know why I picked Doom 2 over Doom 1. I think it's more of a personal preference thing. Doom was great. Doom 2 I played before I played Doom 1. I've got such good memories of this game of my dad playing online with his buddy, connecting, 56K modem. We had to buy a second phone line so that my dad could play games on the internet with his buddies. But playing Doom 2 and watching him play Doom 2 and just knowing that that franchise essentially spawned the first person shooter. Like it wasn't the first person shooter, but it was the biggest at the time. And it with id Software at the helm, it just blew the fuck up into what became your Halos and your Call of Duties and all the modern day first person shooters. They owe everything to Doom and Doom 2 and Wolfenstein 3D.
I agree with that.
And
Yes.
Doom 2 is the best of those three early id Software games.
I actually had shooters on my list as well, so I'm glad you mentioned Doom 2. I didn't have that on my list, but going into shooters, like that was a huge genre.
Still
Like,
is.
I mean, it still is, yes.
Because of those early
Um,
games though, yeah.
I have listed on here the original Halo. I feel like that's a truly timeless game. Like anybody can pick that up and play it. I feel like, the vehicles in that game are so easy to drive, and
Mm-hmm.
you just really pick up the physics in those vehicles like as a natural ability. Like you just learn how to manipulate the vehicle to the best of your ability.
Yeah, for sure.
Like flying the ghosts for the first time, like that always feels good. Like even years and years later, in each Halo game that's come out since then, I feel like the Halo series, in general, are timeless games. Maybe not for five or Infinite, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Halo 1, like you said, for sure though.
Yeah,
Absolutely agree.
yeah. And I also had on here Half-Life 2.
Okay.
I would have picked the first one, but that's starting to show its age a lot.
Yeah.
But Half-Life 2, man, yeah, I think that is gonna stand the test of time forever.
It,
Like it's such a well-made game.
it was the game that was good enough to launch a platform. It launched
Mhm.
Steam essentially between Counter Strike and Counter Strike came out earlier, but um, with Counter Strike and Half Life 2 and then Portal, like that
Yep,
that,
that's
that
also
was
on my list.
that was the
Yep,
beginning of Steam, and now Steam's the juggernaut that it is, built on the back of essentially on the back of Half Life 2, and that game, I cannot believe how good it looked back then.
it still looks good today.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it was Crisis before Crisis came out, you know? Like
Yeah.
it was that game that just like it didn't even like boast how, at least to my memory, from my memory, it didn't boast how good its graphics were. It was more about the physics. That's what
Mm.
that's what all the marketing was based on, were the physics. But it had a great story to it
Amazing story.
as a
Yep.
first person shooter. And for a good FPS does not need a good story, in my opinion. Like Doom, it does.
Yeah,
Nobody
it
cares
doesn't
about story.
exist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody cares.
Totally.
Half Life and Half Life 2. That franchise just had a it wasn't like the best story ever, but for a first person shooter, holy shit, like they actually put some effort into it.
I mean, it says a lot when your main character, Gordon Freeman, like, it's a silent protagonist because you
Yeah.
self-insert as him, and then you meet Dog and Alex and Eli, and it's these characters are living,
Barney.
breathing. Barney, sorry, I forgot to mention Barney, of
Yeah.
course. But yeah, these characters, like, they are so well animated, like their facial expressions,
Yeah.
and you really like sympathize and empathize with them. And the Combine, like, just how they're designed and how imposing they are, and how they've taken over the planet Earth, and like the gunplay, like the sound design, like I still
Yeah.
that
The pulse
booming
rifle.
the pulse rifle, yeah,
Yeah.
that booming sound of that gun shooting, like I will never ever forget that sound. It's so sick.
I don't know if there's been a gun in a game that has had that impact on me. Like, I didn't care for that gun just because it felt a little overpowered and I was always out of ammo pretty quickly.
Mm.
But this, like you said, the sound just made me want to use it because it felt like, especially if you're wearing
So
headphones while playing
empowering.
it, yeah,
Oh, amazing,
it's got that
amazing.
heavy bass to it that just makes
Yep.
you feel it while you're listening to it. It's so good.
I mean, all the guns aside from the pistol sound really good. Like the Magnum and the shotgun. Using the crossbow was fun as hell.
Yeah,
And the gravity gun, like
you can't
that
talk about
alone.
Half-Life 2 without talking about the gravity gun.
Exactly. Yep.
And it
Yep.
spawned the portal gun. Like it was the basis for the portal gun, and then physics based puzzles and like weird first person puzzle games in general were because of the physics engine in Half-Life 2, the source engine. That's that's where all of that came from.
Indeed. Yeah. I just overall just impeccable game. Like there's no faults with it in my opinion.
Well, I'm going to bring up a first person shooter again now then. I'm going to
I have
talk
a
about
couple more too, but you go ahead.
I'll talk about GoldenEye 64.
Oh, okay.
Um
Interesting.
it
Okay.
was I think it was the reason a game like Halo could be as successful as it was. It
Hmm.
was the first successful FPS on a console. And it showed that FPSs don't have to be played like exclusively with a mouse and keyboard. I still prefer a mouse and keyboard for sure for an FPS, 100%. But
Of course.
obviously that's not necessary. And GoldenEye not only made couch co-op and couch competitive games fun, but it spawned the console FPS, and even had like games like Time Splitter at the time that were spin-offs of that. Perfect Dark, games that were very reminiscent of GoldenEye before your Halo, your Medal of Honor, your Call of Duties, Quake, and all of those started coming out. GoldenEye 64 was a leader for the N64 and for friends hating each other.
Yeah. Cheating by looking at your opponent's screen.
Yeah, which is great because there's a game called, I think I've talked about it on here before, a game called Screen Cheat, where it's a
What?
competitive FPS where you're playing online, but you have everybody's screen as a split screen on your screen. I hate saying the word screen that many times, but the people in the game are all invisible. You have to find them by looking at their screen to see where they're standing to know where to shoot.
Oh, that's weird.
It's so fucking weird, but
Nice.
yeah, it's probably mostly a dead game at this point because it came out, I want to say 2018,
Okay.
2019.
Okay. Sure. Sure.
But it was just GoldenEye it didn't exist. This game could never have existed because you didn't have that before Gold. The graphics are even like based off of GoldenEye style graphics. It's fucking great.
You know, I was really debating GoldenEye. I really was, and I chose Halo instead. I feel like GoldenEye is starting to show its age, like for how good it was at the time. I feel like if you play that now, it's just not going to hold up.
I hear
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, the presentation, the graphics in particular are really rough, and it's got great level design for what it was on N64. I think that's its biggest strength is the guns too, like the amount of variety in the weapons you can use.
Well, it was also one of the best movie adaptations.
And that too, yes.
Like, there aren't very many good, like 007 as a franchise is a good game franchise even when they take after the movies. we never see that in any other franchise that's adapted either from games to movies or movies to games. Besides, in my opinion, Sonic the Hedgehog has been. I haven't seen Sonic 2 yet, but I'm looking forward to it because of how much I loved the first Sonic movie. But yeah, it's just not heard of, especially back in the mid '90s when
Indeed. Like I didn't see the movie until much later
same.
after I played the game,
Yeah,
and I was like, wow, this actually is really, really well done. Like the adaptation.
in the way that GoldenEye got me to start watching the Bond films, the same way that WCW NWO World Tour got me to start watching pro wrestling. There's
Mm.
a game on the 64 that got me into something. I don't like care for Bond films as much as I care for pro wrestling, but I'd still put it up there. It's definitely on my list. That's a little bit of subjectivity in there.
Now this might be controversial, but I put a Call of Duty game as timeless,
Modern
and I think
Warfare 2.
exactly. Yep.
Okay.
You know, I hate to put this on those, but it truly is a timeless game. I feel like there's Modern Warfare, the first one, Call of Duty 4, but I feel like what Modern Warfare 2 did was just overall leagues better than Modern Warfare 4. Or excuse me,
Call
shit.
of Duty 4.
Call of Duty 4 Modern
Modern
Warfare.
Warfare, yeah.
God damn it. And a lot of that has to do with the timing of the game. I feel like I think it was 2009.
Sounds about right.
This is when we started seeing a huge surge in competitive FPS games. And I would put Counter-Strike on my list, but there's been so many versions. Like I mean, technically it is a timeless game, but I feel like because it's multiplayer only, not everybody has access to that.
Right.
But with Modern Warfare 2, you do have the campaign, and that's probably one of the most memorable FPS campaigns I've ever played
Well, then
because of all the shocking moments in it.
the special ops mode was really fun too.
Hmm.
Like we go through like shorter levels and try to complete objectives. That was the Modern Warfare 2 was the first game that I actually actively tried to 100% on my 360. And I was always ever one spec ops mission away from getting the last two achievements I needed. And passing that controller back and forth, that was something that we did back in the day
Oh
at
yeah,
my apartment. Was that controller would go around and around, and God, nobody could beat that mission at my apartment. It To this day, I have two missing achievements in Modern Warfare 2 because of that one spec ops mission.
yep, yep, totally. And you know, we could discuss the multiplayer, but I feel like that will fade with time.
Yeah.
Just I'm trying to take into account like the all aspects of the game, and I think as an FPS, it's come the closest to being as memorable as Halo.
Well, on the same note with games that are single player, but also the multiplayer is very important. I put Diablo 2 on my list.
I put Diablo 1.
Did you?
I did.
Diablo
Yep.
1, I tried playing. It doesn't hold up.
Really?
In my opinion, it
I
really
would
does.
imagine it did.
Well, they didn't really have much of a skill tree or that. You read books to get spells. And the game was very. It needed more TLC, I think.
Really? Huh.
It
I played Diablo for the first time much later. I think it was like 2012.
really.
And I was really blown away by how well it held up. Like I was really invested in the game, and it's super simple. Like you pick one of three classes, and you just have one objective: get to the bottom level of this church. And the way that progresses over time, and having to go back to town to upgrade your character, it felt like a very self-contained game that you could really play over and over and over.
Well, I guess what I'm getting out of that is I loved Diablo. I played the shit out of it ever since it came out and up until the point where Diablo 2 came out, and even then a couple of times later. I played the shit out of Diablo. But the fact that the core essence of Diablo is a mini game within Diablo 3, like it's like a seasonal event every year. I think around Christmas time they open the church and you have to try to get to the bottom floor. It's basically Diablo, and they even have like the walking animations like they did in Diablo during that time. It's fucking great.
Awesome.
There isn't much to Diablo, whereas Diablo 2 took the core of Diablo and made it a full fledged open game.
Hmm.
It's just leaps and bounds above. And I wouldn't put Diablo 3 on this list, even though it's more
Oh.
accessible. They trimmed down a lot of the stuff that made Diablo 2 special, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Diablo 2 added so goddamn much. Like it broke the game down into acts. It had a good and necessary expansion, whereas the expansion to Diablo being Hellfire wasn't even made by Blizzard. It was made by Sierra, which it was like a third party expansion, which that's not very common, and it led to the cohesion not really being there. So you
Mhm.
could totally play Diablo without playing Hellfire. But if you're playing Diablo 2, you need Lord of Destruction to get the full game. It had the jewelry was more the all the different identifiable objects that it just had such a greater variety in what it was doing, and it added the runes and the socketing and all that stuff. The Herodric cube is iconic. Like you need that stuff in Diablo now because of it. Diablo 2 leaps and bounds above Diablo, and will definitely. I would go back and play Diablo 2 right now if I wasn't trying to still actively boycott Activision Blizzard. Whereas
You
Diablo
know,
1, I don't think I'll ever play that again outside of maybe like a throwback Thursday or something.
let's go a little more in depth there because I do feel like World of Warcraft has been such an influential game in my life,
Okay.
but I would not put it as a timeless game
Okay.
because World of Warcraft Classic came out and that proved everything right that I was thinking at the time was like why is this necessary first of all? And a lot of the magic that we had when we first played it back in that time period will not be replicated to the current modern day. And
Right.
I felt like I was one of the few that wasn't too excited about it. And I was, kind of glad to be proven right
Yeah.
because, it became such a blitz for the players to like, it took toxicity to a whole new level in that game. And I just feel like World of Warcraft is very much a timepiece, a period piece, I guess you can call it. And I would also argue that StarCraft is a timeless game.
Okay.
I know you have your thoughts against it.
No, I just don't like that style of game. That doesn't
Right.
mean it's not timeless. I agree with you completely.
I think StarCraft is such a well made RTS. Like it took what Warcraft did well and just magnified it. Like, yeah, it's an incredible game.
There's a reason that they've only had StarCraft and StarCraft 2.
Mhm.
It's because they didn't need to iterate. I mean,
Yep.
people have been clamoring for a new StarCraft since, StarCraft 2 essentially. I'm not saying there's no market for it. There's absolutely a market for a new StarCraft game. But I feel like you can go back and play StarCraft, even the original, and still get all the enjoyment that you would need out of it, just without some of the modern day niceties, I guess, of an RTS now. But I agree.
Also, speaking of iterations, like kind of looping back to Nintendo, I think Smash Brothers Melee is a timeless game. I think, yeah, as witnessed by the esports event still being held for it, like it's insanely uh resistant to the passage of time. Like it's just overall really well put together. And I would argue Ultimate is also going to be a timeless game in the future because of how much content there is in that game and the versatile roster. Like there's so many different characters you can play as an Ultimate now. Like it's an amazing game. Like I feel like it will stand the test of time for sure.
Yeah, and if you guys listening to this want to hear more about Smash Bros. And other competitive esports games and fighting games, I highly suggest listening to Round 3. It's a new part of the Geek Freaks podcast. Look it up. Fantastic hosts and very informative. And I want to hear Kyle talk about Smash Bros. With them sometimes from hearing, or sometimes just to hear a different perspective on Smash Bros. Because I don't like that game, but I also agree that there has to be one Smash Bros. Game on this list for sure.
I would have gone with the original because of how, amazing that was at the time, but it really much is like contained within that time period.
That's what I
And
feel with Diablo 1 versus Diablo
yeah,
2.
sure, sure. And I feel like also with Smash Brothers, the presentation, like the graphics are starting to show their age a lot. it's still a great game to play, but I feel like it's definitely lacking in comparison to Ultimate. Like, Ultimate's just bar none an incredibly well-made game. And to finish, I'll let you go ahead next.
Well, I was gonna say I've got one game. Do you have how
I
many?
got I got one game too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you my last game. I think this is the most timeless game because it's like the best or most selling and most iterated upon game of all time. That being Tetris. Tetris is iconic not just for its simplicity but for its music, its design, and the amount of iteration that's been done on it, and has spawned other games like Columns, and it kind of started the match three in a way. Like I think it's the forefather, I would say, to the match three games that are so popular nowadays. But Tetris is just the fact that there's a Tetris Battle Royale game that people still play, Tetris 99, is insane. And then comparing that to a game like Tetris Effect, where you can play Tetris in VR with these like beautiful landscapes going on around the game with amazing sound effects, and it's just so much to Tetris that that game will never not be iterated upon. That's going to be the timeless game in my opinion.
Yeah, it's the quintessential puzzle game. Like, there's no way it's ever going to get dull to play. Like, you could take it any direction, like as we've seen with all the different spin-offs, like Tetris Effect and 99 and countless others I can't recall.
I'm
But
glad you could recall the ones that I just said.
yes, I got carried by you. Thank you.
Sorry. Pushing your
Uh,
buttons.
you kind of are, yeah. Ouch. All right, should I get into mine?
Please do.
By the way, I love how you went way back to the like near the beginning, and I'm actually coming all the way up to the modern.
Nice. It's they're called bookends. We're
Yep,
bookending this thing, yeah.
exactly. Elden Ring is going to be a timeless game.
Oh
I'm calling it.
shit.
I'm calling it now.
Why am I
Yeah,
not surprised? Why was I surprised? I shouldn't have been.
Elden Ring. I'm gonna, maybe get into this a little bit more in the next episode because I have to review it still. But I, it leaves me speechless.
I could
The
tell.
game, the game is so incredible. I cannot. I'm still haven't beaten it. I put 100 hours into it so far, and I'm nowhere near close to finishing it. Like it's a masterpiece. Like
That sounds
it's
horrible.
I do, it says a lot when I don't want to finish the game
Yeah.
because I know like once it's over, that's the new top game for me. And oh, yeah, I'm gonna take a long time to think about it, like how it's impacting my gaming career, so to speak. Like it's such a privilege to play it. Like I feel beyond honored to play it.
I know exactly how you feel because everything that you've said about Elden Ring from before launch up through today is exactly what I've said about Mass Effect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever said Mass Effect is my favorite game of all time, but it's got to be up there as like tied for one. Um, it's just I don't think Mass Effect is timeless in the same way that Elden Ring is, but I'm glad to know that there is that game for you, and I hope that you're glad to know that I know how you feel about Elden Ring whenever you talk about it because it just makes me think of Mass Effect.
Yes. Yeah. It's like it's so hard because all of the Souls games are really fucking good. And I would love to put Dark Souls 1 on there, but we've seen like over time it just doesn't hold a candle to what we've seen since then in the evolution of the genre. I would have put Bloodborne as a timeless game, but the only version of it we have is PlayStation 4, which runs at 30 FPS. And God, I want a PC version so bad. And if that was fixed, that's a timeless game. Like, no question. Sekiro, amazing game. I really wish I could consider it timeless, but because it's got a story that, I don't feel like it's a good fit for a Souls game, but it's still a freaking amazing game. Like, it comes really close. But Elden Ring, like, I just feel like with how versatile its gameplay is, like, the different directions you can build your character, all the different places you go. All I mean, the only knock against it is the enemy variety, but I get it. It's a huge open world game. But I really do consider it a timeless, yeah, timeless game.
If you want to hear Kyle's full review, stay tuned for next week. It'll be probably right at the beginning of the episode next week, I think is what we're going to do. So make sure to stay tuned for that.
And that is all I have, Kevin. There's probably more that we couldn't cover
Oh,
because of
yeah.
the time frame.
Yeah. We know that you guys are going to have your own list, and we want to hear them. So let us know. All of our social media links are down below in the description. We're on Twitter. Twitter's the best way other than our awesome Discord server, which I highly recommend going to the Geek Freaks Discord server and joining us in conversation there. We're there all the time, even if I'm not online. I'm checking it throughout the day, even at work, and I'm pretty sure Kyle was doing the same. And yeah, we're all, even if we're not active, we're still there. So yeah, chat with us. We want to chat with you guys, and we love talking about timeless games. And hope this podcast is going to be as timeless as some of these games are. But we'll find that out in 20 years from now when we're still going strong.
We'll see what happens in life. Indeed.
Anyway, we'll see you next time.
Later.
Love you.